The role of the school board, in my opinion, is to really sort of set the policies that govern the way that the rest of the schools work in the parish. But also I think the school board members serve as a liaison between the community and the administration of the schools, so that we can sort of have open lines of communication and make sure both sides are understanding what the concerns are and what's going on in the school system. So my experience, my career right now is an assistant professor, and so it's sort of like managing a small business in a sense, where I have trainees who I pay, so they essentially function not only as people being educated, but they're also employees of mine. And the way I fund my lab is by writing grants, and so I am awarded grants, and then that is up to me to manage the budget of the grants. And so I have been awarded several grants, around $300,000, as well as some smaller grants, and I'm working for the grants that are typically the bread and butter of NIH, of our lab, which is NIH funded grants. And those are run to the tune of $1.25 million usually. And so I do have experience in managing budgets as well as essentially operating what sort of functions more as a small business, although it is a research lab. I think the things that work really well in our current school district are the magnet programs. We absolutely need those programs in order to attract people into the community, in order to show that we do have good schools here, and I think the magnet schools do an excellent job. And so I would like to see something like that sort of expanded to the best of its ability. However, I understand that we have a huge number of students, and not everybody is going to enter into a magnet style program. I think what isn't working particularly well and what people are generally concerned about is sort of what is perceived as a lack of equality for all students. So they're not all receiving that level of education, the magnet education. And I think that at least improving the perception of having an equal education is really important, and it's really necessary. And if that means increasing the level of funding that goes to certain schools so that they can perform appropriately, then that is an essential component of fixing some of the underperforming schools that we have. Yeah, this is a difficult question. The idea of how do we fund pensions and health care. And it's not just an issue here, it's an issue everywhere in the country. I'm also part of the state retirement program. I have taken the optional retirement program because of the concerns with the funding of the state retirement. So I think because the community is responsible for the healthcare portion of it, the best thing we can do ourselves is to ensure competition. And so not having all healthcare concentrated into a single major entity is probably fairly important. And I think that that's going to happen with the upcoming deal that will occur between LSU Health and Ochsner Health Systems. I think that's going to be a dramatic improvement in our community in the Shreveport and Caddo Parish area, by improving competitiveness in healthcare, and hopefully that will allow us to have better choices and reduced costs. Yeah, I think that's really all I can say about that. I think competitiveness is really also going to allow us to maybe be more attractive to other businesses as well, right? I think that if we have better healthcare systems, we can encourage more development in that area. We're very strong in it already, but if we can encourage more development in that area, we can hopefully reduce prices in that way. That's a great question. It's tough closing schools because that's people identify with their schools, right? That's where they went, and that's a big part of their identity, especially in many neighborhoods. But unfortunately, as population declines in certain neighborhoods, it becomes more and more difficult to keep schools open, and that's why we've had to close a few. And probably there are additional neighborhoods in which the population of the school is declining such that they may need to be closed in the future. Alternatively, we have neighborhoods with no schools that are exploding in population, right? Because the population of Shreveport largely moves outward into the, sort of suburban type districts, and those areas don't necessarily have schools. So we absolutely need to consider the neighborhoods and the way that they're growing. They don't remain the same over time. It's just the nature of growth in an area. So the idea of opening new schools when we have a declining population sounds a little counterintuitive, but in fact we need to serve the neighborhoods where there are large populations of children but don't have neighborhood schools. So I'm a big believer in public education as a great equalizer. I think it should give everybody the same opportunity for an education. That's what public education is about. I represent a district that has at least one of the magnet schools, and I would represent this district, Bird, and just a few other schools. And those are schools that are high-performing schools, right? So, but my goal is to make sure that all schools are able to perform and all students are able to receive the quality education that they deserve from a public school system. And that's really what my true and firm belief is that I need to represent everybody in order to ensure that they get a quality, equal level of education as all students in the district. So in science, I'm a scientist by training, and we talk a lot about ethics. We're required to do ethics training on a regular basis. When you are in competition with other labs on a similar project, it's sort of a race. It's a race to publication, and publication is our currency, right? The more publications I have, the more esteemed view that people have of me, and it also helps me to get grant funding. And so when you have people working for you in the lab, they give you data, and these go towards a publication or a paper. And so can be instances in which your student presents you with data and it supports your idea very strongly. But we also like to control our data to make sure that it gives us the right reading and we're not interpreting something incorrectly. And so you can get this data that really supports your stance on an idea, but it doesn't always have all the right controls. So the interpretation is sort of up for it's a debatable interpretation. So you can take two paths, right? You can take the path that supports your stance. It allows you to publish sooner and it makes you look good. But for me, it's really important that my data hold up over time and my publications hold up over time. I don't want them to be disproven by other people down the road. I want to be correct in my data interpretation. So I prefer to choose the path, although it's very difficult, in which you have your student go back and repeat experiments with the proper controls, because it's essential to the integrity of science as a whole and what we do in the lab. I want to make sure that my publications have the best interpretation possible based on the controls. Well, okay. as you know, I'm a scientist, and so my first priority is improved STEM education. So I've been involved in STEM education when I was a graduate student, as well as some when I was a postdoctoral research fellow at the National Institutes of Health. And in other places, some communities excel at having STEM education as part of their school education, their school system. I don't see it in that much depth here, and I would really like to see an improvement on that. And why? Why is it so important to improve STEM education? That's because the jobs of the future are in biotechnology, computer and engineering, right? And we want those businesses to come to Shreveport, to come to Caddo Parish. That's who we want to recruit here for this to be a growing and thriving community. And so I think that we really need to prepare students for the jobs of the future. A second issue that I'm sort of on a related note that I really want to support is career preparedness. Not just career preparedness, but college preparedness. I don't believe that our students are adequately prepared to attend college. I see this in the graduate students then that come to my lab who are also underprepared in certain aspects of their education, and I would like to see them much further before they come into my laboratory. So how do we get STEM education and career preparedness improvements in our school system? Certainly by engaging other members of the school board. The best way for me to engage members of the school board is open communication and honest communication. If people can't trust you, then they're unlikely to be supportive of your stance on anything. And so I think just building trust is the best way to communicate with other members of the school board. I also think that we can engage members of the business community to better prepare our students for careers in what exists here now. I'm not sure that many students even have ideas of what they want to do when they grow up. And I think it's really important to give them an idea, not just by telling them you can be a scientist, you can be a doctor, you can be an engineer. What does that mean? They have to see these jobs in action in order to understand what that career really means for them. And that's the best way to get them excited and better prepared for the future.